I'm going to do a little sketchbook work today, and I'm going to talk about a few drawing techniques and a few things that are really important to observational drawing that I think a lot of people miss. I've got my sketchbooks out. I've got some objects down here, and I'm going to talk about a few different pencil options, and I'm going to talk about how to draw a few different types of objects. I did bring some of my favorite objects over to the table here. I got those Catopales, I've got this stick. I still need to figure out what kind of stick that is, but it's got some fun fungus growing on it. And I've got that honey locust pod there, which I find very interesting because it has kind of a, it almost looks like polished leather, doesn't it? It's actually very hard and crusty and crunchy, but it almost looks like leather, so it's got kind of a shiny thing going on that I really like. Okay. We'll actually start with these leaves though. So one of the biggest things I think a lot of people miss when they start drawing is seeing. A lot of people look, not very many people in my opinion really see. That's why I give exercises in observational drawing in class. That is why I stress looking at the subject, should say seeing the subject, not just drawing what you think you know about the subject. Some classes I've taught, a few of you have taken classes with me where I started the year out with a blind contour lesson. And I'm not going to do that today, but the reason that blind contour lesson is so important, and for those of you that haven't done it, it's basically I make people draw their thumb without looking at the paper, is because it teaches you to pay more attention to your subject than to your drawing. The drawing in all reality is not that important at this point. The important thing is the subject, whatever it is you're drawing. The drawing is a reaction to the subject. You wouldn't be drawing it if it wasn't important or interesting to you. The result, the drawing, winds up sometimes being a valuable thing, winds up being display worthy, sometimes winds up being worth money for some artists. Although that isn't the ultimate goal of the artist to make money. Money is a reality of our society. Art is something a little bit higher and more valuable, more important. Personally, it's something that's more timeless, that carries from generation to generation. But the valuable thing about the work is that you're responding to something that is valuable or interesting. So again, ultimately the important thing is the subject, not the drawing. The drawing is a reaction to the subject. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to draw this little interesting piece of the leaf and come down here and show some of these overlapping areas. And I'm not doing this totally blind, as I was saying before. Blind meaning that I'm not looking at the paper. In this case, I'm looking at the paper, but I'm spending probably 80–90% of my time looking at the subject. This is a contour drawing to start. I will probably shade this in a if not in this exercise, then in another one I will. But I'm spending about 80–90% of my time actually with my eyes on the subject, observing it. I'm glancing at my paper every few seconds to see where I'm at. I'm going very, very slow here, taking my time. If something appears to come closer to me, like this area came closer than this area, I did darken a little bit to make it seem like it's popping out a little more. It may not be visible on the camera. I'm actually go over this and do the same thing. It may not be visible on the camera, but I can see it. It reminds me that that piece pops out more. I'm actually going to stop here, and there's a shadow that travels along here that kind of shows that this surface pushes in and this part bumps out right here. This bumps out, this pushes in. So I'm actually going to lightly, interior lines are always lighter in contour, so I'm going to lightly do that. I slid my hand a little farther back on the pencil so I don't put as much pressure, because that will become a shadow, not an outline by the time I'm done. Remember, if something is going to be a shadow as opposed to an outline when you're done, you don't want to push so hard that you gouge the paper and give it a scar. You just want to use your line as an indicator of where things are going to go when you're done. Make sure it curves the right direction to give the impression of which way the surface is going. See, it bumps over, dips in, bumps over, dips in. There's kind of a pattern to it, although it is a little bit random. Nature has patterns, but their patterns are Nature's patterns are a little more random than human patterns. We tend to like things to be nice and neat and regular, which is why observation is so important. The looking 80 to 90% of the time at the subject is so important, because if you don't, you're going to impose your human patterns on it, which are kind of limited, put things in boxes, so to speak. You're going to want things to be very regular and consistent. There, I went off the camera, sorry. You're going to want things to be really regular and consistent naturally, because you are human. The spacing is going to be so regular, it's not going to look natural. If you want something to look natural, you got to let it have nature's patterns, which, like I said, are a little more seemingly random. They're produced by the genetic makeup of, if it's a living thing, the genetic makeup of the living things, which do have patterns. Each cell is similar to the others, but the way they form the actual living leaf in this case, and then the way, of course, nature acts on it to dry it when the season is over and it falls, that makes things appear a little more random. A little fold here I'm going to put in. Now, I told you I was going to start this as a contour drawing. I actually intend on shading this, so I can actually start shading a little bit here. I want to put that area inside, a little shadow along the side here. And again, I am still looking at the subject more than the paper, because that's what's going to tell me where things go. Remember, in a natural shaded drawing, there will be no outlines visible. So all these lines, these contour lines of mine, are just showing me where things are going to go. I'm going to get rid of them before long here. And I probably should stop myself. I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to stop and put in the rest of the leaf before I put any more shading. I just found this little shadow down here interesting. Alright. Now I'm going to go back in these interior spaces, and as I was saying a minute ago, interior lines are always lighter than exterior lines in contour drawing. Exterior meaning edge of the form. Interior meaning across the surface. A contour line is not an outline. It's a surface line. It defines the surface of the form, which means it can travel through or across the form in its definition of the form, which includes these little veins. They're the most obvious ones because they do appear to be lines or the edges of shadows at first when you first start drawing this. But it can also just include the surface itself. And you can do it with things other than just these lines. Notice I am letting my hand shake a little bit on purpose. And I'm actually even, sometimes I rotate the pencil back and forth in my hand to make it shake a little bit, because these leaves are a little rough and irregular at the edges, especially this torn leaf that's been on the ground for a while. I picked it up in the fall and saved it, but it had already been blown around. As a matter of fact, it's a catalpa leaf. It was on the opposite side of my house from where that catalpa tree is. I know what tree it came from. It blew around in the wind, and so it got a little bit beat up. Whoops, slipping. And that's really just this portion, whoops, this portion of the leaf in contour line. And I think I'm going to go ahead and stop there, and I'll make shading a different video. But this is a great exercise for you to start seeing and observing what's going on around you. This is how I start pretty much every drawing that I do. I don't do a lot of sketchy back and forth drawing for the most part, especially with a really natural object like this. I usually start with a contour because it's much more precise, it's much more reactive to the subject, and it makes me pay more attention. When you do quick sketchy things, you can do that for like gestural drawing with the human form and stuff like that, or larger structures, things in perspective. But I find that this technique is a much more natural way to approach living things, or things that were living at one time, because you can catch a lot more of the subtlety of it. And you really want to combine, if some of you remember our perspective lessons, that was all done with a ruler. This is all very free form. You need to be able to combine both techniques, kind of more free form, seeing the form, seeing the textures kind of an approach. Combine that with that structural approach you gain in perspective drawing in order to really make any strong work of art. Because perspective still applies to irregular forms. The idea, anyway, of perspective. It's not linear perspective because there's no straight lines in nature. Straight lines don't exist in nature. Okay, everything, even this stem, is not a straight line. It curves several points. It's wider here than it is here. It's wider here than it is here. It's a little thicker here in the middle than it is here at the base, actually. A lot of people think that branches and twigs are always thicker at the base and thinner in the middle. This one actually gets thinner right here and then thicker again right here, just a little bit. That's why you got to pay attention to subtlety like that. It's not always what you expect. Again, straight lines don't exist in nature. That's why you got to pay attention. Don't trust what you know. No one knows as much as they think they do. Human beings like to think we know everything. We don't. Okay, so that's my admonition for the day, is open your eyes and see. Don't just look. See. And remember, you don't know as much as you think you do. Trust your eyes. Let your hand do what your eye tells it to do when you're drawing. And you do that by taking this out of your mind and really paying attention to this, the subject. Whatever it is you're drawing, you may not find this leaf interesting at all. Whatever it is you're drawing is your whole world when you draw. And this is just an afterthought. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll be posting more in Classroom over the coming weeks for you to follow along, and we'll hopefully make some bigger drawings as we go.